Election night in 1994 was glorious. We had set up our war room at the Cobb Galleria Center in Atlanta to get returns from individual campaigns across the country. The early results were promising, but we waited until we crossed the 218-seat margin before claiming victory about 1:30 a.m. on November 9, 1994. When we realized we had finally reclaimed a Republican majority in Congress after 40 years of Democrat rule, the party began. Sean Hannity hosted the election night event. He worked for WGST-AM in Atlanta, but he became a great friend and personally volunteered to MC our election night event. It was a remarkable evening that will always be fixed in our minds as a moment when everything was good and working. A better future for America was in the wings, and it set the stage for an enduring Republican majority that lasted a dozen years. But that's not really what this book is about. This book is about reaching that achievement. As my longtime advisor and co-author Joe Gaylord and I thought through the history of the Republican Revolution, we realized that it is best described as a sustained march. It didn't happen overnight. It started long before 1994, and it endures today. In fact, no one expected the massive Republican victory in 1994. Before September 16, 1994, even we didn't fully expect it. That was the day Gaylord walked me through why we would win the majority in November. I was flying to a national event in California with Gaylord, my close friend Steve Hanser, and a collection of our top staff members. We were in the back of the plane, sitting around a table, discussing the ins and outs of my move up from minority whip to minority leader, and Gaylord just cut in. He said we were wasting our time making the wrong plan. He said, "You'd better begin planning for Newt to be Speaker. He will be, following the election on November 8th. As we sat there, stunned, Gaylord spent 3 hours talking through the elections we would win, state by state and district by district. He was off by one district. No one expected us to win in downtown Chicago, but more on that later. That was the day we knew something historic was about to happen. Picking up 54 seats, we became the first Republican House majority in 40 years. By itself, that was historic. But then we led the majority in such a way, and got enough positive things done, that in 1996, we kept the majority for the first time since 1928, even though we lost the presidency. That ended a 68-year slump for House Republicans. At first, we thought we could begin the march to the majority when I was elected to Congress in 1978. And in terms of taking the first full steps, that may be right. As an energized freshman, I boldly recommended to the National Republican Congressional Committee that we create a long-range planning committee. I unabashedly suggested that the committee take the grand old party, which had been the minority party for 24 years at that point, and chart a deliberate course to become the majority party. This may seem like an obvious idea now, but many of the Republican members had been in the minority for so long, they couldn't imagine planning anything like this. They had an almost Stockholm Syndrome attitude. They were defeatist and used to being subordinate to the so-called permanent Democrat House majority. I'm sure some of the party leaders thought I was totally naive and unrealistic. But Michigan Representative Guy Vanderjagt, who was the chairman of the NRCC, bought in. The planning committee concept was accepted, and in December 1978, I began a project that mostly failed for 14 years. After all, if you keep score by asking, "Are we a majority?" we failed in 1980, 82, 84, 86, 88, 90, and 92. After 7 failed elections and 14 years of effort, in 1993, we set off on what finally became the successful effort to become a majority. But Gaylord and I agree that even this understates the full length of the march, because it took me 5 years to win a congressional seat in Georgia. That meant we had to think about 1974 and 1976, the 2 elections I lost. Before that, We had to think about 1972, when, with Bo Calloway's help, I became the Georgia 6th Congressional District Coordinator for the Richard Nixon re-election campaign. That job gave me the resources and legitimacy to go around the congressional district laying the base for my own campaign. Gaylord had to think all the way back to 1960, when, as a teenager, he watched every minute of the Democrat and Republican National Convention coverage. And later, when he first read Barry Goldwater's The Conscience of a Conservative to make better arguments on his high school debate team. So Gaylord and I thought a great deal about the story of our political activity and how we should explain it. Slowly, it occurred to us that all the benchmarks from the 1960s forward were, in some ways, insufficient. The truth is, my development and growth as an active citizen who cared about politics went back to August 1954, when I was 11 and desperately wanted my hometown to have a zoo. My desire to really work for and serve the American people was later cemented by a trip to the battlefield of Verdun in France. So, there are pivotal stories from our early lives that illustrate how this march started for us personally. Many of these stories have never been told publicly before. Many are not explicitly related to the Republican Revolution, but without them, we would probably not have gotten there.